Rosy. It is wonderful to have you here. Happy holidays.
Happy holidays to you. Thank you so much for having me back. I really appreciate it.
Of course, I find you to really give so much insightful information when it comes to chronic illness like endometriosis and adenomyosis, and how you really can talk about things from a firsthand perspective, but with such empathy and compassion. Because as we know, when you're living with a chronic illness, it hits at any time, sometimes in the most inconvenient of times. And it also can get bothered, we should say, by stressful life events. And even though the holidays are meant to be festive and full of love and cheer, sometimes they're very, very difficult. So I wanted to get your perspective on some ways that people can cope through the holiday season with chronic illness.
Yeah. No, well, thank you. And I think that's a really important factor that people often don't consider. With holiday season, everyone's really excited. You're seeing friends, family, and it's sort of billed to be this perfect, harmonious time. But actually, it can be really stressful. You're seeing loads of family members, and everyone's family is complicated. It might be that there's, awkward relationships. It might be that you're grieving, you're missing a loved one. It's making you think about that. It's also, if you've got something like endometriosis or adenomyosis, it's a time where so often well-meaning family members will ask you big life questions, and actually it can be quite stressful because, maybe your job's not going how you want because you've been unwell, or you're asked if you're about to start trying for a family. They don't know whether you're already doing that or not. They don't know the complications around it. And so I think there's a lot of pressure, societal pressure, for it to be sort of like a hallmark season, like a sort of postcard. And actually it can just cause a lot more stress and anxiety. And it's a lot of more socializing than usual too, which again, with a chronic illness, sometimes you're just not up to it, but it's almost as if you feel forced to sort of partake in everything.
No, those are excellent points. I didn't even think about the pressures of answering the questions, because I know for myself, I've been in those situations where people will just ask. And I don't think anything is ever to be offensive or intrusive, but it still can strike a chord, especially if you're struggling with something. And in terms of the socialization, for some people, they might have an overly filled social calendar. And then for someone else, it could be a very isolated, lonely time where they might not feel included or have anyone to share the holidays with, which is very difficult.
Yeah, I think so. And I think, I've seen from a lot of my followers that a lot of people are really excited, but a lot of people are also quite nervous because you're seeing family. There might be activities booked, there might be lots of socializing going around different family members' houses, and the pressure to sort of keep up with everyone else and go along with everyone else, and the fear that what if I have a flare, and am I going to be, the party pooper because I am not having as good a time as everyone else. And I think it's really important to bear in mind that actually you're best for everyone else if you do what makes you feel you're most comfortable. So if you just sit one out, it's not going to burn bridges and it's not going to be a fallout. It's better that than you get more and more uncomfortable, more and more in pain, and put yourself in an awful position, because then it's not like you're necessarily going to be good company in that circumstance anyway. And if it's your family and your friends, they want you to feel well, and it might be they've not seen you for a while, they don't know how bad it can get, and I think that can be quite daunting too. And people often don't know how to deal with it. So I think just being upfront and honest about how you're feeling is almost half the battle when it comes to something like that.
For those who are a loved one of someone who suffers from chronic illness, if, let's say, your loved one says, I'm unable to make it to the holiday party because I'm feeling unwell, how would you suggest they respond?
That's a really good question. I think, it depends on the person in question. If it was me, I think the best response would be, someone saying, what would you like me to do? Would you like me to stay? Would you like me to go? Because for some people, they just want company. But actually, I think for other people, the guilt of feeling that you've kept someone else back is even more than that. So I think just for someone to say, okay, that's absolutely fine. Do what you need. What can I do? Is there anything I can do? Would you like me to still go? Would you like me to stay back? There's no strings attached to whichever option. Just genuinely, what would you prefer happens?
That's really good advice. And I think for caregivers, and loved ones, it's difficult to know how to respond because there's part of us that's like, no, come on, push through it. And we know that that's not the most gentle approach.
Yeah.
And then there's the other side of like, okay, do you? And that also might seem like, So it's, I think it's best to just respect any and all choices of the person that isn't feeling up to par.
I think so. And I think, I think we might have mentioned this even last time. There's, people with chronic illnesses often get a bit of a bad rap. And I think it's because people don't understand rather than willful ignorance.
Yes.
But, thinking that maybe you could actually go, but you're just saying it for saying its sake. Whereas the opposite I found to be true. I can only speak for myself and what other people have told me, but people try and keep a mask on. And it's only when things are really bad that they let it show. So if someone's telling you that they're in a bad way and they do need to sit one out, it's probably even worse than they're letting on rather than the reverse, which I think people tend to forget, maybe because it's easy to think, oh, I really hope my loved one is in that much pain, so maybe they're amplifying it a bit. But it's really dangerous to think that way, because then you can start to undermine that person as well. So I think taking what people say at face value, but also having in mind it could actually be worse than they're letting on, and they don't want to be a burden on you, but to factor that into your response too.
Right. No, that makes a lot of sense as well. And with chronic illness as well, it's a heavy load to carry
Yeah.
on a daily basis. Some days are harder than others, but there is also a delicate time with the holidays, especially for mental health
Mhm.
and depression that could be around, or anxiety. I just want to give a message of be gentle, be kind. Don't expect for it to be a Hallmarkian holiday that you're supposed to have everything handled and you're supposed to have this picture perfect, idyllic relationship or family or job. That life is ever evolving and ever changing, and that these holidays are not our markers of where we expect or think we should be. They
Exactly.
are just days, and there's always a better day and a next opportunity on the 26th or the 2nd of January, that opportunities for happiness and love and career and health are always there. And that this shouldn't define anyone.
I think so. I think that's a really good point. You're right. I mean, it is just a day. It's a lovely day for a lot of us. It's an awful day for some others of us, but the world shouldn't center around that day, nor should the year. And so, when people are asking you about big life questions in that moment, it is just a moment. And so you can be honest and sort of say, oh, well, not at the minute. You can also, I think it's quite fair if someone asks you a question which doesn't mean to pry, but it does pry into things like fertility or family. You can just say, oh, I don't really want to talk about that. And then ask another question quickly and move it on. It doesn't have to be fraught. It doesn't have to be huge, awkward. I think people do respect when you just sort of establish a little boundary in a friendly way. It doesn't have to be aggressive.
Right.
Establish a little boundary and move the conversation on.
Yeah. I think that's an appropriate request, especially when it is public and you're around a lot of people and someone asks what could be a prying question. And I know I've been in that situation not too long ago where someone asked a deeply personal question in front of my son and myself, and it was not the time.
Yeah.
They asked one question and then I kind of said, and then they asked the second follow-up question. And I said, okay, I said, this is really not the day. Let's just enjoy everyone. And I ended up having to walk away.
Yeah.
And
Which
I
is
found out
fine.
later.
Yeah.
And it was uncomfortable. And it's not something I like to do as a people pleaser. And that person apparently felt very, very bad after and said, I don't know why I did that. That was out of character for me. And I feel badly. So, I don't think, as we said, I don't think the intention is there to hurt or make anyone uncomfortable, but we are humans and we do say things that we don't necessarily think about the repercussions.
Yeah.
And I think as long as we can hold our own and kind of use our boundaries, which is difficult, it's hard for me to do.
It is.
And I don't like doing it.
No, I'm exactly the same, but I think it is important to do. And, in that situation, you walked away, you didn't get angry, you didn't lose your temper. I think that's perfect. That's what it needs to be. And as you say, that person then realize, and that's all it takes, I think, sometimes is just to allow yourself to be a little bit polite but firm, and then, you know, you move on, and no one's going to hold grudges about that sort of thing either,
Right.
I don't think.
Always just direct everything to the food. Just go to
Motto.
the food. No, we should get some appetizers. Or did you know that I baked this cake? Technically, I bought it for $25 at the local bakery, but I baked the cake. Whatever it takes to just divert the conversation.
Yeah. No, that's perfect. I think that's the best tactic. And, you know, just to bear in mind that everyone has these situations too. Like, it can feel really personal, can't it, in the moment? But everyone has this situation around Christmas. No one, you know, what you see on Instagram, you know, is picture perfect. No one's Christmas is going to be perfect. No one's
No.
year has gone perfectly. No one's exactly where they need to be. If they are, fantastic for them, but try not to compare yourself to other people as well, because what you see isn't necessarily what's actually lying beneath a lot
Right.
of the
And
time.
and in general, it's everything is like, again, it goes back to nothing is permanent. No situation. I mean, even in your happiest moments, as much as we wish we could just freeze them into a snow globe of eternal time,
Yeah.
you can't. I mean, unfortunately, life ebbs and flows for
Mhm.
good and for better and for worse. And it's just the way of the life cycle. So I just hope people keep that in mind if they're going through a difficult time. And
Yeah.
that, you know, I always like to push on the you are not alone in your feeling. There are other
Yeah.
people in the same spot, and just don't have such expectation is kind of like the failure of man, so to speak. Less
Yeah.
expectation, less disappointment.
Exactly, exactly. And as you said earlier, be gentle with yourself, not only with yourself physically, but mentally as well, you know, to allow yourself to feel what it is you're feeling, but not push yourself to do everything under the sun across what, the 3 days that we
I
have off
know.
over Christmas.
I know. Like, I don't have New Year's Eve plans, and I was getting into a little bit of a spinning of like, oh my gosh, like I don't have plans. This is like, this is kind of sad. I'm turning 40. I don't have New Year's. And I was like, oh my God, stop. I'm like, I will be happy watching like a bad episode of Married at First Sight and having my son peacefully sleeping
Yeah.
and a glass of hot cocoa. And that's okay. It's just, this is where I'm at this point at this year. And that's okay. So,
Yeah.
um, yeah, don't ever feel like you're the only person sitting on the couch.
No, no. And actually, a lot of us at parties, that's where we'd rather be as well.
Yeah. Yeah. I'd rather be in my own company than the company of others I don't really like so much. But Rosie, I love your company. I love
Oh,
when you're here with us. You are one of the kindest souls, and it is just such a joy to have you. And I hope that you have a wonderful holiday with your loved ones, and especially as a new bride. It's very
yes, I know.
exciting.
First Merry Christmas. Oh no, thank you so much for having me. It's such a pleasure chatting to you, and it's great to talk about these things as well. You don't get to, you know, in the day to day. So
Yeah.
it's really a pleasure. Thank you.
Thank you. We'll see you soon.
See you soon. Bye.